Welcome on into the Utah Broadcast. I'm Steve Bartle, Utah Insider for KSL Sports. Good to be back with you on a Tuesday. This is our In Whitt's Words episode where I essentially add context, add details, add a little bit of color to some of Coach Whittingham's comments from his Monday morning press conference. And just in an effort to try and provide some details, figure out, the message behind the message and that sort of thing. So, and on Monday, Coach Whittingham certainly shared a few things that I think got a lot of attention and a lot of reaction, and understandably so. So, want to get into that on this episode. But first, excuse me. Appreciate everybody that has listened, has tuned in. I've ran into a lot of people the last couple weeks that have expressed their appreciation for what we're doing here with the Utah Blockcast, and I just want to say thank you to you guys for listening, for tuning in, for supporting the Utah Blockcast. It means a lot to me, and it's been a lot of fun to get to know you. So if you see me out there and now you're starting to recognize my face, it's been a lot of fun to meet a lot of you. So please, again, if you see me walking around Rice Eccles Stadium, if you see me walking around campus, the tailgate lot, say what's up. I always appreciate chopping it up with folks that tune in and support the Utah Blockcast. So appreciate everybody. But let's dive into this. Obviously, Utah coming off the 34-10 loss to Texas Tech. Obviously, a tough one, given the excitement around the weekend with Big Noon kickoff. It certainly seemed like Utah was shaping up to have a really exciting game, and unfortunately, that was not the case. And I think what we learned in Coach Whittingham's press conference on Monday played a significant role in why that was. And if you go back to Utah versus Wyoming in that second half, Devon Dampier at one point came up a little gimpy after a tackle, and it seems like that impacted him this past Saturday. And so Whittingham was asked about Devon Dampier's health, and here's what Coach Whittingham had to share. And I quote, "He was doing the best he could. He wasn't able to practice Tuesday or Wednesday, a little bit Thursday. I'm going to tell you that it definitely impacted Devon, but if you're out there, there's no excuse. You've got to get it done." And I think that's the key, right? Is Utah made no excuse about it. And obviously with the injury report and all of that, and now learning about Devon Dampier's injury status and how it impacted him throughout the week, certainly it has drawn a lot of attention and a lot of conversation over the last 24 hours. And obviously, the big question is, why wasn't Dampier listed on the injury report? And I think obviously the key is, the report it's a projection for Saturday, not a practice attendance log. And Dampier was always going to play. He was always 100% going to play on Saturday. So Utah wasn't hiding anything. It was all within the rules. And, there's been conversation about, not misleading and acting in good faith. And honestly, I think Utah acted in complete good faith for not reporting Dampier's injury and, understanding that he was always going to play on Saturday. There was nothing they were trying to, mislead people about. Unfortunately, it cost Utah. And I think they are the ones that, put themselves in a tougher situation by not acknowledging it. So, there's obviously a lot to pick apart here. But, I think first and foremost, acknowledging the fact that I think Utah fans are justified in feeling some frustration. This isn't just about, Saturday. It's about the last couple of seasons, right? Where the handling of injuries and the reporting around them has felt, murky. It's felt inconsistent and sometimes just confusing and baffling sometimes. And I think the recent history with that on the injury front has made people a little less willing to give Utah the benefit of the doubt. Um, even if Utah followed the rules to the letter of the law, right? If you read the rules again, I think Utah wasn't hiding anything. It is a game availability report. It's not a practice day by day type of who practiced, who didn't type of practice injury report. And so, I get it. I get the frustration from Utah fans. It is also interesting to me that Devon Dampier, um, unfortunately, uh, put himself at risk, but he was willing to go out there and put it on the line for his guys. And I think that's something that even just 5 years ago with Tyler Huntley, we remember him. He suffered an ankle injury early on in that 2019 season, but continued to go out there and perform at a high level. And given everything going on, that season with Andy Ludwig, that being his first year, new offense, you would certainly understand Tyler not played, had not suited up, that you would understand why that was. But the conversation has just changed, where it's gone from appreciating when these guys go out there and put it on the line for their teammates, for the fan base, to give it their best. I think there's no question that Devon Dampier is still far and away the best option in that quarterback room to lead Utah to victory, especially against that Texas Tech defensive that the Texas Tech defense. He deserves credit for going out there despite not being at 100%. But I think, again, given what's transpired over the last couple of seasons at Utah specifically, you understand why there's a lot of frustration and maybe PTSD is probably the better way to put it. But I think, again, Whittingham acted in acted within the rules. I shouldn't say Whittingham, Utah in general, acted within the rules to the letter of the law. As frustrating and as annoying as that might be, I don't think they were hiding anything. I think they set up Texas Tech even to be prepared for Devon Dampier's best when he wasn't. And I think that allowed them to come in ready to go. So, look, I think there's a lot of things going on here, but I think all things can be true, right? That Utah acted within the rules, that there can be frustration over this situation, but also that we need to acknowledge Devon Dampier willing to go out there and play despite missing time. So I hope that that's something that continues. I shouldn't say I hope that's something that continues, but I hope that the appreciation for Dampier and what going out there and doing that. Obviously, he needs to perform better, and I think that's the big thing, and kind of gets us into that next topic here and talking point from Coach Whittingham on Monday is that moving on, right? He shared that you have 24 hours to feel all the feelings of a disappointing loss, but you've got to move on. And with Utah, you've got a big opportunity this weekend going on the road to the East Coast, to Morgantown, West Virginia, against Rich Rod and the Mountaineers out there. And this is an opportunity to put together a bounce back performance. And I think, like we talked about, Bennett and Tyson and I talked about Monday, is that Utah needs a significant bounce back performance. They need to show that resilience. They need to show that Texas Tech isn't going to beat them twice. That's something you hear Coach Whittingham talk about all the time. You can't let a team beat you twice. And so this is what he had to share when asked about that very thing. He said, and I quote, "I'm very confident that this team is not going to allow that to happen. That's their attitude, their competitiveness. We've got a lot of good things going for us this year." And I think that's really important to keep in mind. Yes, it was a very disappointing loss, right? You lose 34-10 on your home field. Given the stage, it certainly is painful. It's a tough loss. It's a tough look, and the fan base is certainly feeling it. But there's still plenty to play for with Utah. There's still a lot of good things going on. It's unfortunate that Dampier wasn't fully healthy, wasn't at 100% for this game. I agree that I think it impacted him, but this is where we're going to learn a lot about Utah is this week and how they respond to the adversity. We saw them respond to in-game adversity against Wyoming, where they had a lackluster performance in the first half, came back out in the second half and really put it to the Cowboys with those 4 touchdown drives. Now it's about how do you overcome, what happened last week, right? How do you overcome that adversity? I think that's what we're going to learn. We're going to get a much better idea of what this Utah team is and what sort of trajectory they're going to be on moving forward the rest of the season. I think there's a lot of guys in place that will hold this team accountable and continue to push this group moving forward. But we've got to see it, and that's kind of the question mark. And going on the road to the East Coast, to time zone, it's always kind of an interesting X factor when you're talking about college football is long distance travel and how it impacts these guys. But I think this is a significant opportunity for Utah to get back on the field, to correct some issues, correct some mistakes, and to allow this leadership to shine through. And this is where I think it's going to be really, really important for Utah to have a good performance, right? How Utah plays at West Virginia is going to reflect the locker room, not just the coaches, right? Do the players rally, hold each other accountable? Do they bounce back on the road, or does one game lead to a spiraling effect? And I think that's what we're going to learn, obviously, with this one. And, with Dampier specifically, I think he understands, that last week's performance was largely due to, him not being at 100%. And after, hearing from Coach Whittingham and talking to people that are close to him, I think Devon Dampier's competitive nature, I think his understanding of the situation and awareness of where Utah football is at and how important it is to this community are going to be things that I think drive him to be better. Now, with this game, what you would love to see is Devon Dampier and the offense come out and they're firing on all cylinders, right? They get up quick. They build a comfortable lead, and perhaps you're able to get Devon Dampier out of that game earlier than when the clock gets to zero, right? If you can get him out of the game early, get Bird Ficklin some reps, maybe Isaac Wilson, whoever it ends up being, but allowing him to get out of the game and getting some of these other guys reps, I think would be really vital for Utah in this matchup specifically, because then you get into the bye week and you're going to be healing up and addressing a lot of the injuries that guys are dealing with, right? Everybody's got bumps and bruises, and I think that's going to be the key. So I would hope that Utah responds pretty emphatically this week in terms of what they're going to be asked to do against West Virginia. I hope that they go out there and show what sort of leadership and accountability they have in the locker room. And I hope that we see, a bounce back performance for this Utah team. Now, before, moving on completely from Texas Tech, I think it is important to note that Coach Whittingham gave a lot of respect to the Texas Tech Red Raiders and Joey McGuire and, what they're doing there down in Lubbock. To open his press conference, he said, quote, "Really impressed with Texas Tech's football team. A lot of talent on that roster. Very well coached. Played a really good game against us on Saturday. They deserve a ton of credit." And obviously, when you lose 34-10, like that's you're going to hear stuff like that. And I think Whittingham was really consistent in terms of praising Texas Tech for making things really, really difficult. Coach Whittingham tried to talk about some of their own issues, on offense and what led to that. And it always reverted back to giving credit to Texas Tech for making it that way, right? Why did Utah struggle on the ground? Well, it's because Texas Tech's defensive front was really aggressive and more physical and all of those sort of things. So I think, with Tech coming in, obviously we've talked about it a lot, and the conversation around that program all offseason has been about the money being invested into that program. And I think it really came through on Saturday against the Utes, who were just unable to, get much going on the offensive side in particular. So I do think that Tech really lived up to the hype. I think that's a really good football team that was built the right way, right? Through the trenches. Obviously, the offensive line is kind of a bit of a question mark, but that defensive line is going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of other Big 12 programs this season. So I think that's the biggest takeaway from Saturday's game is just how impressive Texas Tech was. And two, I want to make sure I make note of this as well. Prior to the game, I had a few conversation with Texas Tech fans, who were in attendance, and they all had a lot of really positive things to say about their experience. And I think in the aftermath of the game, there was a greater deal of respect, at least on social media, right? It's not a complete reflection of an entire fan base, right? Right. Utah. There's always a few out there that maybe aren't the best representation, but I think for the most part, the Texas Tech fans that were in attendance for Saturday's game and were there in Salt Lake City and made the trip from Lubbock or from Texas, wherever they came from, I think they all came away really impressed with Utah fans, with Rice-Eccles Stadium, with Salt Lake City in general, and you could see it in post-game comments and interactions on social media, just how much more respect there is, mutual respect between Utah fans and Texas Tech fans. So I thought that was really interesting to see that. I do think there's a great deal of respect for each program now after having watched the game and seeing these two teams go to battle. I think it was really good to see that. And I think Utah fans did a tremendous job of providing a great experience for Tech fans. I know that there was a point of emphasis for some on that front on social media to do exactly that. And I think Utah fans really showed out. And again, it gets back to the atmosphere in Rice-Eccles Stadium. That carried a lot and meant a lot. It was significant. It was huge. It was the story of the weekend until until the final buzzer was 34-10. But the crowd, Utah crowd, Rice-Eccles Stadium, really impressed this weekend, and Utah fans deserve a lot of credit for that. So I think that was a big thing. And then final thing here from Coach Whittingham on Monday, he was asked about the run game and Utah's inability to get things going. And like I mentioned earlier, he gave credit to Texas Tech and that defensive front, and rightfully so. I think that Red Raider defensive front made things, well, I know that defensive front really made things difficult for Utah to get things going. And they were aggressive. They were playing on their toes and took away Utah's strength. And that's tough. When Utah can't run the ball, it makes things really, really tough on the offense. And obviously it was compounded by the fact that Devon Dampier missed time in practice and wasn't, as sharp as he should have been for that type of matchup to execute things in the passing game. So Utah was just kind of hampered. But when talking about the run game, I do think Utah got a little too cute with things, trying to get to the edge. And Kyle Whittingham talked about that. He acknowledged that. Here's what he had to say about the run game issues. And he said, and I quote, "We run too laterally. We've got to get more downhill. We should have more downhill run game and not so much side to side. Would like to see one running back emerge as well." And to this point, I think given how the Texas Tech game went, I think, yeah, Utah was trying a little bit too hard to get to the edges, to get to the outside, to the perimeter, instead of just running at Texas Tech. But I think on the season, don't get away from what's worked. Utah has accounted for over 600 yards running outside the tackles. Of their 900 whatever yards it is, over 600 have come outside the tackles. Utah has found a lot of success running outside the tackles because you've got athletes in Caleb Lomu and Spencer Fano who can get outside, who can get to the edge, who can collapse the defensive front to create lanes for the run game to the perimeter. I think that is important that Utah maintains that mindset and that approach in the run game. But I do think there should be greater balance in terms, a greater point of emphasis in getting downhill, running inside. There is certainly room for that. There's room for more runs inside, but you don't need to abandon what's worked so far. But just add a little bit more balance inside out. And I think it'll really enhance the run game. I think Utah would have benefited quite a bit from running directly at Texas Tech, allowing that offensive line to get more vertical push. And I think there's ways that you can do this that still allows you to emphasize the athleticism that you have in those offensive tackles while taking advantage of the size you have inside. You can run more power, you can run more counter, you can get these guys out into space, you can, get these combos and double teams and working that sort of stuff, I think will really benefit the run game moving forward. And to his second point, that he would like to see a running back emerge. I agree. I think Utah needs to find somebody that can command. I shouldn't say find somebody. I think they know who it needs to be. I think it's Wayshawn Parker that needs to be the RB1. He needs to command 70% of the carries in that running back room, because he explained it. In talking about those two running backs, Wayshawn Parker and Nakari Rogers, he gave a lot of credit to Nakari for being a short yardage type of guy, a guy that's really good between the tackles. And that's, he's lived up to that. He's been really productive, especially in those short yardage situations, in the red zone, getting into the end zone and that sort of thing. But he also said that Wayshawn is kind of more of that home run hitter. And I think it's important for Utah to give him more opportunities to be that home run hitter, right? Give him more work, allow him to get into that rhythm, allow him to be that workhorse. Yes, both need to, be more secure with the football. And I think that has to be the point of emphasis for each of them this week, because both put it on the turf. But I think Utah needs to shift to Wayshawn Parker being the guy, being the RB1 in that room. He is the talent. He is the guy that, was the big offseason addition in that room. Get him the ball a little bit more and allow this run game to thrive by incorporating more inside run, adding to what you've got going on, getting to the perimeter and that sort of stuff, and take this run game to the next level. So that's my take on his run game analysis. I do agree that they need to get more downhill, but you don't need to completely abandon the outside rushing attack, because it is a strength of your offense. But I do completely agree that they need to get a running back to emerge, and I think it needs to be Wayshawn Parker that emerges in that room. So that's what I've got for you on this one. A short one, a quick one. We'll be back at it. We've got basketball stuff to talk about. We were up on the hill yesterday all day, basically. Whitt's press conference. Then we had Utah women's basketball media availability. We got to watch a little bit of practice. We got to watch then a little bit more basketball with the men's basketball program. A little bit later, we got to hear from Alex Jensen and a couple players as well. So a lot going on up there at the Hill. I'll be back tomorrow with a conversation with a West Virginia insider, and so that'll be a lot of fun. Looking forward to the trip out to Morgantown. If you've got comments, what you're looking for in terms of this weekend, if you're making the trip out to West Virginia, would love to hear from you. Appreciate everybody that's tuning in. We'll be back at it tomorrow.